You might be falling for these common self-care myths that are actually doing more harm than good. As someone who works with people all day, every day, these are common myths that I hear people believe and that really keep them stuck when it comes to their overall well-being. The number one myth, self-care is selfish. This is the number one myth that I really want you to debunk, because the truth is self-care is not selfish. It's that classic analogy, when you're on a plane, you have to put your air mask on first before you can put someone else's on. This is so true when it comes to self-care, but yet for some reason we've all bought into this belief that having time for ourselves, recharging, is somehow selfish. I find this even more so if you're a mom, whether you're a new mom or you have multiple kids, a working mom, stay-at-home mom, any type of parent really, but moms for sure really buy into this belief that self-care is selfish, that you should be a martyr and you should put everyone's needs before your own. Also, if you tend to be someone that's more of a people pleaser, you might get really stuck here because it might feel like setting time aside for yourself or saying no, protecting this time for yourself might be counterintuitive or might mean that other people aren't going to be happy, or you might have to deal with some confrontation at times, so that can be really difficult. But the one thing that I really want you to know is that self-care is not selfish. It's a necessity. It's something that you need to do to keep going. And unfortunately, I find that a lot of people have to get to a point where they're either stressed out or their body is signaling to them that they can't do anymore, or if there's someone that struggles with chronic pain, they have a flare-up and they just have to slow down or take a break. So it's something that I want you to just really be aware of. Stop buying into this myth. It's not helping you. Myth number 2, self-care has to be expensive. I talked a little bit about this in my last video when I went over this concept of financial wellness, and that's one dimension that does contribute to overall well-being. But this belief that you have to go to this like all-inclusive resort or a retreat where you get to meditate, or a silent retreat, and that you spend thousands of dollars and you have to go to another country or somewhere very remote to come back and have this like very like holistic experience and you just feel like a new person. And no shade on that. Like, listen, I want to, at some point I will do one of those retreats, but what I really want us to kind of debunk this myth is that you actually need that in order to practice self-care. That's not true, and the reality is that's actually out of reach for most of us. Now, of course, like I talked about, self-care isn't selfish, so if that's something that's important to you and you can afford it and you can do that, by all means, you do you, boo. But what I'm saying is that you actually don't need that to practice self-care. Self-care is about finding any or all activities that are really going to rejuvenate you, that are make you feel better. Of course, are there activities that cost money and you have to invest in? For sure, but they're not necessities. Like, we can do a whole bunch of activities that don't cost a dime. If you want to go take a walk in your park or go meditate on the beach, that's free. Maybe go pay for parking at the beach. If you really enjoy kind of soaking into a really good book, go to your local library or check out the Libby app. That's a plug for the Libby app. If you don't have it, go check it out right now. If you want to make new connections or make new friends, go on Meetup, the app, and see what free group is available, or just connect with your current friends, and you don't have to go somewhere expensive, go to a brunch that are charging really expensive drinks. Just say, hey, can we just go to a park and have a walk or a picnic? So I just want you to start to have the concept that you actually don't need to invest these huge chunks of money in order to find activities that rejuvenate you. And actually, let's all learn from each other. Comment below, what are the best free self-care activities or low cost activities that you guys do? Again, what are the best free or low cost self-care activities that really help you recharge your batteries? Let's all learn from each other. The next myth is that self-care is just about physical health. Of course, physical health is important. It's one dimension of overall well-being, an important one. I don't want you to ignore that. I want you to find healthy ways to move your body, nutrition, sleep, the basics pretty much, but it's not the only one. And that's really, really important. I mean, have you known someone that is all into, fitness, whatever that means or looks like, that does marathons, triathlons, whatever the case is, but when we look at their other areas of their life, they're really not thriving or doing well? I find this is particularly true when it comes to relationships. Relationships is one aspect that can be really hard for people and have its own nuances. And so we just want to be aware of, don't just exclusively focus on physical health as this dimension of wellness. Really think about these 8 dimensions that I talked about in my last video, but particularly like emotional wellness, social wellness, right? Those connections with one another, spiritual wellness. And if you're already mastering the physical wellness, fantastic. That just means you have much more room and energy to dedicate to these other areas. And listen, we're all a work in progress. So it's okay if these other areas are areas you've neglected. That's fine. This is just an opportunity for you to look at that and reflect. All right, the next myth is that you need a lot of time for self-care. This is so true specifically for millennials who are overwhelmed and stressed out. They really buy into this belief that they have to carve out these huge chunks of time in their day, weekly, or monthly life in order to dedicate to self-care. Of course, if you're in a stage of your life where you do have that time to dedicate to self care, great, good for you, that's fantastic. I find for the vast majority of us, this is a huge barrier and a huge myth that keeps people stuck. So I really like to think about micro mini changes, and I really highlighted that in the last video. Like, what are things that you can build into your existing routines in terms of science that's going to help you make change? If you add something to your existing routine, it's probably going to be easier to maintain because you already have that routine, right? So if like you have a morning routine where you drink coffee, could you have a glass of water before your coffee if that's what wellness looks like for you? The next myth is that self-care is about avoiding responsibilities. So there's a couple different pieces to this. I think in our mentality, especially when we have so much to juggle, work, family, social obligations, that it might feel like, self-care is just another form of procrastinating or avoiding or delaying. And that's not true. If you really understand the purpose of self-care and the reason you're doing it, going back to really recharge, rejuvenate, and that it's something that you need to do, it's not optional because eventually your mind and body will tell you that you need to do it, then you will understand that it's not another form of avoidance or procrastination. I think especially right now in our culture where there's like hustle mentality, work, 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 do more, take advantage of every spare second that you have a side hustle, that even more so can feel like carving out time for self-care is just something else that I'm doing to avoid all these things that I need to do, all the to-dos on my list. Now, I do want to acknowledge that, of course, I'm sure you or people have at times used self-care as some type of like avoidance or not having to confront a difficult situation. We all engage in avoidance at times. That's just human, and it's not really a problem if it's occasional because that just happens. But where it starts to become an issue is if you notice this bigger pattern. Overall, you tend to engage in these activities that you say are self-care, but are actually just ways for you to avoid having to deal with difficult situations. So here's kind of like an example. If you say, hey, I'm taking a social media detox, like on the surface, that sounds fantastic. And I'd probably say, great, take a social media detox if that's what you need. If you're noticing spending so much time on social media and all the apps is unhelpful. But if I dig deeper and then you say, and it just so happens to be the week that I'm launching a new passion project, and it'd probably be really helpful if I share with my family and friends or my social network what's going on, even the launch of this new site or whatever, that would be really helpful. But I'm taking a social media break that week, so I can't do it. So I would get really curious. It's like in that moment, is that really about self-care and rejuvenating, or is it more about avoidance and not having to put yourself out there? And maybe it's a little bit of both, but which one tends to be much more dominant? Because could you take a social media detox after you kind of share about this launch or so forth? Whatever the case is, I would just want you to get curious. But if we go back to the main point overall, I really want to acknowledge that self-care isn't about procrastination. If you think that's the case, then I think you're missing the point when it comes to self-care. Okay, so now you understand these myths that you have to drop and no longer buy into so that you can prioritize your well-being. To really take this concept of self-care to the next level and actually apply it to your life, you need to watch this video here on the screen. This is where I'm going to walk you through how to actually do a self-care assessment to see maybe your blind spots and what you need to change. So go watch this video now. And like I always say, I encourage you to continue nurturing your mind, body, and soul, whatever that looks like for you guys. Thanks.